Welcome to Bookish Mind, Season 3, Episode 12, where we discover how the earliest lessons in emotional intelligence are not taught in classrooms, but at home.
That's right.
Today on the deep dive, our mission really is to unpack this profound truth. Our emotional blueprints, those basic guides for how we feel and react, they're mostly drawn right there in the family home.
Long before school starts.
Exactly, long before any formal education kicks in. And it shapes us in these deep, sometimes surprising ways. We're looking at some significant research today, including Daniel Goleman's work, to really highlight how much early family dynamics impact a child's emotional intelligence.
It's fundamental. We're exploring how everything, from just everyday family chats to the whole feeling of the home leaves these lasting marks, neurologically, socially, sometimes good, sometimes not so good.
It's like peeling back the layers on where emotional competence actually comes from, or sometimes where the struggles begin.
Exactly.
Well,
Those foundations are laid in our most private spaces.
okay, let's maybe paint a picture. Think about Carl, Anne, and their daughter Leslie, who's 5. They get a new video game. Should be fun, right? A family thing.
You'd think so. But it quickly goes sideways. Leslie's trying to play, and her parents are, well, maybe too eager to help.
Yeah, help. But it just turns into chaos. They're giving her conflicting instructions, orders flying everywhere.
It's a common enough scene, but what happens next is really telling. And the mom is going, to the right, stop, stop, stop. And her voice is getting tighter, more anxious as Leslie struggles.
And you can just picture little Leslie, only 5, sucking her lip, eyes glued to the screen, wide-eyed, totally overwhelmed.
Then Carl, the dad, jumps in. See, you're not lined up. Put it to the left, to the left.
And Anne's yelling over him, stop, stop. It's just this mess of commands, a total jumble.
Right. And Leslie, she can't process it. She can't possibly please both of them. Her little jaw just tightens up. Her eyes blink. And then, tears start welling up.
And the really tough part is the parents are now kind of bickering with each other. They completely miss Leslie's distress. Anne snaps. She's not moving the stick that much.
While Leslie's tears are literally rolling down her face, neither of them seems to see it.
Her dad just barks, okay, put your hand back on the stick. You want to get ready to shoot. And her mom adds, okay, move it just a teeny bit.
And Leslie's just left there, sobbing quietly, kind of alone in her anguish.
Wow, that's rough to picture.
It is. In this moment, it seems small, maybe, but it's a huge lesson happening right there. For Leslie, one takeaway might be, my feelings don't count, or nobody notices when I'm upset.
And when stuff like that happens over and over.
Exactly. When these moments repeat throughout childhood, they teach some of the most basic, fundamental, emotional messages anyone ever gets. Lessons that really shape your whole life path. Family life is, well, it is our first school for learning about emotions.
It's where you learn about yourself, how people react to your feelings.
Yeah, and how to read others.
Yeah.
How to express your own hopes and fears. It's all happening right there.
So it's not just direct interactions like the video game thing. It's also the example parents set with each other, how they handle their own stuff.
Precisely. This emotional schooling happens through observation, too. How parents handle their own feelings, how they interact with each other. Some parents are, naturally gifted emotional teachers. Others, unfortunately, can be pretty atrocious.
Is there research on this? How do we know?
Oh, yeah. There's that fascinating study, the microanalysis by Carol Hooven and John Gottman at the University of Washington. They actually recorded couples and their kids.
Oh, okay.
And they found really clear data. Couples who showed more emotional competence between themselves in their marriage. They were also the most effective when it came to helping their kids manage their own emotional ups and downs. That video game session we talked about, it turned out to be a surprisingly powerful barometer of the parent's emotional style.
A barometer. I like that. So what did the research show about the less effective styles, the emotionally inept ones, as the source calls them? What are the typical problems?
Well, they kind of grouped them into 3 common patterns that don't work so well. First, you've got parents who just ignore feelings, flat out. A child's upset is treated like it's trivial or maybe just annoying.
Right. Get over it. Missing that chance to connect or teach.
Exactly. Then there are the parents who are too laissez-faire. They notice the feeling, sure, but they think any way the kid handles it is fine. Even hitting, for example. They don't step in to guide towards, better ways to cope.
No guidance. Okay. And the third?
The third, and maybe the most damaging, is the contemptuous style. These parents show very little respect for a child's feelings. They're often disapproving, really critical, punitive, especially if a child shows anger or frustration.
Like yelling, punishing for showing emotion.
Yeah. Think of the parent who snaps, "Don't you dare be angry," or just forbids feelings like that.
Okay, so those are the pitfalls. What's the flip side? What do the parents who are more emotionally adept do differently in those moments?
They act like what the researchers call an emotional coach or a mentor. They actually see a child's upset as
An opportunity. How so?
an opportunity to connect, to teach. They take the child's feelings seriously. They try to actually understand why the child is upset, asking things like, "Are you angry because Tommy hurt your feelings?" Getting specific.
Okay, validating the feeling and trying to understand it.
Right. And then they help the child find positive ways to soothe themselves or handle the situation. Instead of just letting them hit, they might say, "Look, instead of hitting him, why don't you find a different toy to play with for a bit until you feel calmer?"
Guiding them towards constructive solutions.
Exactly. Offering alternatives.
And I guess to be that effective coach, the parent needs their own emotional intelligence dialed in, right? You can't teach what you don't understand yourself.
Absolutely critical.
Mm-hmm.
A parent needs to grasp the nuances of emotion, like knowing the difference between sadness from watching a movie versus sadness from losing a pet, or recognizing that anger often, bubbles up from feeling hurt underneath.
Without that kind of understanding, it's hard to guide a kid effectively.
Very hard. You might misinterpret what's going on or offer advice that doesn't really fit.
What's really striking is just how big the payoff is for this kind of emotional coaching. The source says the impact is extraordinarily sweeping.
It really is quite profound. That University of Washington team found a whole range of benefits. Kids with these emotionally adept parents, well, first off, they just get along better with their parents. There's more affection, less tension.
That makes sense. Better connection.
But it goes way beyond that. These kids become much better at handling their own emotions. They're more effective at self-soothing when they get upset.
So they learn to manage themselves better.
Yes, and interestingly, they actually tend to get upset less often overall.
Wow. And it even impacts their physical health.
Yeah.
And social lives.
It does. Biologically, they're more relaxed. They show lower levels of stress hormones in their bodies. And over a lifetime, you can see how that might lead to better long-term physical health.
That's incredible.
Socially, yeah, they tend to be more popular. They're better liked by their peers. Teachers see them as more socially competent.
Fewer behavioral problems, too, I imagine.
Definitely. Parents and teachers both rate them as having fewer issues like rudeness or aggressiveness. It all ties together.
And the link to learning? That seems huge. It's not just about feelings, it actually helps them in school.
That's a really key finding. These kids can pay attention better. They're simply more effective learners. And get this, even when you control for IQ. So take kids with the same IQ level. The 5-year-olds whose parents were good emotional coaches had higher achievement scores in math and reading by the time they reached 3rd grade.
Okay, that is a powerful argument. It shows emotional skills aren't just soft skills, they're fundamental for learning readiness.
Absolutely. It proves that emotional intelligence really does prepare children for school, for academics, not just for life in general.
So this whole process, this shaping, it starts incredibly early. We're not just talking school age. This begins basically in the cradle.
Spot on. Right from the very beginning, Dr. T. Barry Brazelton, the famous Harvard pediatrician, he had this simple little diagnostic test.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
He'd offer a baby 2 blocks and invite them to put them together. A baby who feels, hopeful, confident, they might pick up 1 block, look it over, maybe drop it, see if you pick it up for them.
Testing the waters a bit?
Exactly. When you do retrieve it, they eventually manage to put blocks together.
Right.
And then they look up at you with this bright, expectant expression, like they're saying, "Hey, tell me how great I am."
Ah, that's a lovely picture of early confidence. What's the contrast look like?
Well, babies from homes that are maybe more bleak, chaotic, or neglectful, they often approach that same simple task with this air of expecting to fail. They have the coordination, they understand, but even if they succeed, they might have this sort of hangdog look.
Like they don't expect praise.
Yeah, almost like they're saying, "See, I'm no good, I failed anyway." It's heartbreaking. And these kids, sadly, are more likely to go through life with that kind of defeatist attitude, expecting little encouragement, maybe finding school joyless, struggling, even dropping out eventually.
This really flips the script on what predicts school success, doesn't it? It's not just about knowing letters or numbers early.
Far from it. Success in school depends, maybe more than we realize, on these emotional traits that are formed before a child ever sets foot in the classroom.
So what are we talking about? Confidence, curiosity.
Exactly. Being self-assured, interested, curious. Being able to rein in impulses, to wait your turn, follow directions, knowing how to ask a teacher for help when you need it, getting along with other kids. So many students who struggle academically, even if they're bright, often lack one or more of these core emotional intelligence skills.
It sounds like there's a whole foundation of emotional skills needed for learning.
There is. The National Center for Clinical Infant Programs actually laid out 7 key ingredients, and they're all tied to emotional intelligence.
Okay, what are they?
It starts with confidence, that sense of control, believing you can succeed. Then curiosity, finding things out, is actually pleasurable. Intentionality, wanting to have an impact and sticking with things.
Persistence.
Right. Then self-control, being able to manage your actions, having that inner regulation. Relatedness, engaging with others, understanding them. Capacity to communicate, sharing ideas and feelings effectively. And finally, cooperativeness, balancing your own needs with the group's.
That's quite a list.
It is. But having that basic heart start, as the source calls it, that's what really determines a child's readiness for kindergarten and beyond.
It's so clear how these lessons just keep getting reinforced day after day, starting from those very first moments.
It's a continuous molding process. Think about a 2-month-old baby crying at 3 a.m. Scenario 1. Mom comes in, she's calm, nurses the baby, gazing lovingly, maybe humming softly. Baby feels safe, content, drifts back to sleep.
What's the lesson there?
That baby is learning basic trust. People are dependable. My needs get met. I can signal for help, and it works.
Okay. And scenario 2.
Same baby, same 3 a.m. cry. But this time, mom is tense. Maybe she just argued with her partner. She picks the baby up, kind of abruptly, muttering, "Just be quiet, I can't handle this." She stares blankly ahead while the baby nurses, replaying the fight in her head.
The baby feels that tension, I bet.
Oh, absolutely. The baby squirms, stiffens, maybe stops nursing. Mom puts him back in the crib, maybe lets him cry until he just exhausts himself back to sleep.
And the lesson there?
That baby might be learning basic mistrust. Maybe nobody really cares. Maybe my efforts to get comfort don't work, or are even met with irritation. It's what Eric Erickson talked about, developing either that basic trust or mistrust early on.
So these seemingly small everyday things, a feeding, a puzzle, they add up. They shape how a child expects all relationships to be.
Exactly. That little girl struggling with a puzzle. If she asks mom for help and gets a warm, "Sure, honey, let's figure it out," that's one message. If she gets a curt, "Don't bother me right now," that's a totally different message.
Repeated over time.
It molds her core expectations about closeness, about help, about whether her needs matter, and that outlook colors everything later on.
It really highlights the risks for kids whose parents are, as the source puts it, grossly inept.
Yeah, that's referring to situations where parents might be really immature, struggling with addiction, severe depression, chronic anger, or just living chaotic, aimless lives where they can't provide that consistent, attuned care.
And the research suggests simple neglect can be incredibly damaging.
It can be. Sometimes even more than outright physical abuse, which is shocking. Studies show neglected kids often fare the worst. They tend to be more anxious, have trouble paying attention, seem apathetic, but can also swing between being aggressive and withdrawn.
And that statistic about repeating first grade.
A staggering 65% in one study. It shows the profound impact on their ability to function and learn in a school setting.
And this is all happening during a critical period of brain development, right?
Absolutely critical. The first 3 or 4 years, the brain is just exploding in growth. It reaches about 2/3 of its adult size, and the complexity increases faster than it ever will again. This is prime time for learning, especially emotional learning.
So severe stress or neglect during this window can actually impair the brain.
Yes, it can physically impair the development of the brain's learning centers. The consequences can be deep and incredibly long-lasting. Trouble focusing, pervasive suspicion instead of trust, chronic sadness or anger, being destructive, high anxiety, scary fantasies.
And feeling unlovable.
A deep sense of being unlovable, yeah. Which tragically can stop them from grabbing opportunities later in life because they don't feel worthy or capable.
This leads us into a really dark area, how this kind of parenting can actively fuel aggression and even, disturbingly, snuff out empathy. There was that long study you mentioned following kids from age 8 to 30.
Right, that longitudinal study of 870 children. It found that the kids who were the most aggressive at age 8, quick to fight, using force, were much more likely to drop out of school later.
And the long-term outcomes.
By age 30, they had higher rates of conviction for violent crimes. But what's really sobering is the cycle. They tended to pass this pattern on. Their own children, when they reached grade school, often showed the same kinds of aggressive, difficult behaviors.
It became a generational pattern. What was the parenting like in those families that seemed to create this cycle?
Well, these adults, who were the aggressive kids themselves, often recreated the kind of home life they grew up in, which essentially became a school for aggression for their kids.
How so? What did that look like?
They often experienced and then dished out really arbitrary and severe discipline. Punishment wasn't linked logically to what the child did wrong. It depended entirely on the parent's mood.
So unpredictable and harsh.
Exactly. Bad mood, severe punishment, good mood. Maybe the kid gets away with anything. And alongside the harshness, there was often just general disinterest, ignoring the child much of the time.
That combination sounds awful.
It fosters deep feelings of worthlessness, helplessness, and this sense that the world is just threatening. So you adopt this combative stance just to survive.
It's a really bleak pathway. And then there's that extreme end, the actual extinction of empathy. That story about Martin is chilling.
It is deeply disturbing. He's 2.5. He accidentally bumps a little girl in daycare. She starts crying. Instead of showing any concern, what does he do?
He slaps her arm, tells her to cut it out.
Repeatedly. And when she keeps crying, he actually bares his teeth at her, like a snarling dog, hissing. He tries to pat her back, but quickly turns into pounding, hitting her harder and harder, even as she screams.
Just no sense of her distress, only aggression. What does the research say about kids showing that kind of reaction?
Well, Martin was part of a study specifically looking at toddlers who had suffered severe physical abuse themselves. They compared them to non-abused toddlers, even those from similarly high-stress homes.
And the differences were clear.
Stark. When faced with another child's distress, a situation where empathy might normally emerge, the abused children reacted overwhelmingly with fear, anger, or physical attack. Never concern, never empathy.
Can you give other examples?
The researchers saw things like one abused little girl making this ferocious, threatening face at a crying child. Another, just a 1-year-old, would literally freeze in terror when another child cried like he was bracing for an attack himself.
Wow.
And another 2-year-old who was almost sadistic, knocked down a smaller baby, then started patting him, but the pats got harder and harder, turning into hitting.
So this isn't just bad behavior, it's a learned response, a complete lack of empathy shaped by their own experience.
They're treating others exactly as they've been treated. It's callousness born from their own suffering. And this is an extreme version, maybe, but you see echoes of it in kids who have parents who are just consistently critical or threatening, even if not physically abusive.
And the long-term consequences follow that pattern.
Yes. As these kids grow up, they're more likely to struggle cognitively, be aggressive, unpopular, suffer from depression. As adults, more trouble with the law, more violence. That failure of empathy often just repeats, generation after generation. Brutal parents often were brutalized children.
It really drives home the idea that the brain itself is being shaped by these experiences.
Absolutely. Shaped by brutality or shaped by love. Childhood is this incredibly potent window of opportunity for learning these fundamental emotional lessons, for better or for worse.
So wrapping this up, the core message seems undeniable. Family life is the first school for emotional intelligence, and its impact is profound and long-lasting. It shapes everything: how we feel, how we learn, how we connect, how we behave.
It truly does. But maybe there's a final thought here, something hopeful tucked away in the research. While these early experiences leave incredibly deep marks, even what the source calls savage imprints from trauma, there's an implication they can be mended, at least partially.
Through new emotional learning experiences.
Exactly. Which raises a really interesting question for all of us, doesn't it? If the brain keeps being shaped by experience, by both brutality and love, and even severe trauma isn't necessarily a life sentence, what does that tell us about our capacity for growth and change?
Not just for kids, but for adults, too.
Yeah, for adults as well. Perhaps through new relationships, therapy, conscious effort. What can we take away about the idea that emotional development might be a continuous journey? How can we keep learning and evolving emotionally no matter where we started?
That's a really powerful thought to leave our listeners with, a continuous journey. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. We really hope you, listening, will continue to think about these earliest lessons and their echoes in your own life and the lives you observe.